I find that the older I'm getting, the less I find myself looking forward in time and instead looking backwards, revisiting a lot of my favourite games from my younger years, where I also notice that it's slowly becoming harder and harder to access certain titles, as they get more and more restrictive in how they can be played. And while the whole remaster scene is getting more inclusive, there's still a whole bunch of games out there that haven't gotten the treatment they deserve, and are still somehow trapped in their original forms.
What?
Games too, which you'd really think would be treated better, especially considering how insanely popular some of these were in their heyday. Either way though, I thought it might be worth going back to take a look at a few of these, if only just to give myself an excuse to go back and replay them all over again to get footage for this video. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about the best games that still haven't been remastered, shall we? Before I start though, I will mention as always that this isn't supposed to be some kind of definitive all-inclusive list. So if there's any titles you can think of that I didn't mention in the video, well, be sure to let me know in the comments, as opposed to bursting an artery or having an aneurysm over the fact that I didn't bring it up. Make sense? Good. Let's get into it.
Looks like we'll be a little delayed. What are you doing? Don't think, shoot!
Now, I don't think this first game really needs any introduction. Metal Gear Solid is easily one of the best games ever made for the PlayStation, and just such a huge and important title in so many other ways, especially with how it influenced everything that followed.
I've been waiting for you, Solid Snake.
It's got an iconic opening sequence and main theme, truly legendary dialogue, memorable set pieces, boss fights, and it's also one of the few times where the male gaze was incorporated as a gameplay feature.
Thanks for the help.
I still remember my friend at school telling me about the Nikita launcher trick against Sniper Wolf. And then I also made a save file specifically during the Metal Gear Rex fight, just so I could show it to him after school one day. Plus, I also reckon I arguably played that original demo as much as I did the final version. So it's safe to say that for a lot of people, it's held in high regard, which makes it insane to think that it's just never been remastered in the 28 years since it first came out.
No, I'm serious.
Konami have historically shown that they don't really give a shit about any of their franchises, and this is definitely one of those instances. Now, to be fair, like, remastering this would probably be pretty damn tricky. I mean, you're talking about something running on almost 30-year-old tech at this point, with all of this also being tied to that in-game engine. Not to mention the sound effects and the voice acting are also super compressed given their age.
Besides, it's a waste of time.
Meaning that all of that stuff would probably have to be redone from scratch. And yeah, hopefully not as poorly as they did with the Twin Snakes.
Gray Fox!
But yeah, like, it seems like they've just never bothered, even despite it being not only one of the highest selling games for the series, but also the platform, apparently selling over 7 million copies. Not to mention going on to become one of the most recognizable and respectable franchises ever. Which is doubly annoying given that we did get a really good remaster for both Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3, which has arguably gone on to become the ideal way to play both of those games. We did of course get the MGS Master Collection a few years back, which came packaged with that original version, even including all the different regions too. But this was mostly just a pretty half-assed emulation job, and it didn't actually include any visual updates.
Alright.
There was also a PS3 version as well, available on the digital storefront, but yeah, again, that was just emulating the PS1 and pretty poorly at that. So currently, the closest thing we have to an actual remaster is to play this through emulation, using something like DuckStation, allowing you to really clean up the image and get the whole thing looking super sharp and crisp. DuckStation also lets you remove that whole texture wobbling effect, and even use some pretty nifty fan-made enhancements too, like a proper widescreen hack. So if you're the kind of person who really gets hung up on old games looking old, well, this is by far your best bet. Oh yeah, and for people who are probably saying to just go and play the Twin Snakes, well, to them, I'd say that I'd rather shit into my hands and then clap.
Freeze. No.
Failing that, your other options are just to play it on an actual PlayStation. Yeah, the way Kojima-san intended.
Oh, really?
Which isn't actually as hard as you might think, considering that second-hand copies of the game still do run pretty cheap. There is as well a PC port, which was at one time super glitchy, but is now next to perfect, thanks to a really handy fan-made launcher that lets you modify a bunch of different features to get it working properly.
Cool!
So yeah, maybe one day Konami are going to give this thing the love it deserves, but at least there is easy options out there in the meantime. The same which can't be said about the next game in the list, with the original Silent Hill. Yeah, the 1999 survival horror classic that kicked the whole thing off, starring Father of the Century Harry Mason. He ventures off into a nightmarish, fog-covered town to rescue his daughter, taking on horrific monsters armed only with a pistol, a shotgun, a rifle, not to mention his gigantic balls.
In that case, I need to find her now. Cheryl's my little girl.
Yeah, most of us dads can only aspire to be half the man this guy is. Now, while Silent Hill wasn't a super strong seller, especially not compared to the Resident Evil series, it still pushed out a respectable 2 million sales, which is nothing to sniff at. And more importantly than that, it obviously kicked off the whole franchise, something which has gone on to become one of the most loved horror series of all time. All by a large demographic of people who base their entire views and knowledge of it off long plays and other people's opinions on YouTube. It's again too, another one of those games that's just never been released on any other platform, let alone remastered. I mean, you've obviously got the original PS1 version, with there being both the PAL and NTSC regions, both of which have some pretty stark differences, but really, that's it. Now, like Metal Gear Solid, there is also a version of this available for the PS3 on the digital store. However, unlike MGS, there isn't an actual PC port, which means that for a lot of people, that old PS1 emulator is gonna be your best bet.
I really don't get what's going on.
And time sure ain't being kind to this game either, with second-hand copies of it for the PlayStation running you upwards of hundreds of dollars. Now, there is a recompilation project for PC that's in the works, which does look promising, and is planned to include the entire game almost being finished, which means at this point, the fans have given this thing more attention and love than even Konami have. And again, making it really weird to consider how they've never bothered to tidy this thing up for any other platforms. And in fact, at this rate, it seems like we're gonna get an entire remake for it before it even gets remastered.
I hope so.
Oh yeah, because in case you guys don't know, Bloober Team announced a while back that they're working on a full remake, you know, just like they did with the second game. I do kind of wonder though if a remaster for this might slightly ruin the vibe that they're going for, because I can say that for me personally, like a big part of what makes this game so scary is really how low poly the whole thing looks. I mean, there is a reason why there's like a whole subgenre of horror games these days that try to copy that aesthetic. You know, with the whole low polygon, short draw distance, and dithered visuals. The kind of thing that this first game just effortlessly nails. Where you can identify just enough of your surroundings to make the whole thing unsettling, while your imagination fills in the blanks. And I don't know, like a remaster that makes everything super sharp and easy to see could kinda ruin some of that vibe. But you know what? When the alternative of not getting a remaster is getting something like the HD collection that we got for the second couple of games, maybe we should consider ourselves lucky.
I want to go get it. Is that okay?
Yes, yes.
We did 20 takes, and that was the best one.
But at least if we did get a remaster, crappy or not, Silent Hill fans could finally actually play the first game for a change. Compared to the next game we're going to talk about, which, as far as I could tell, everyone has played, and that's the Simpsons Hit and Run, which would have to be one of the most wanted remasters of all time.
This is worse than when Jub Jub ate my cat.
Released originally back in 2003 and developed by Radical Entertainment, same guys who worked on Hulk Ultimate Destruction, Scarface, and Prototype 1 and 2. With Hit and Run being something of a follow-up to an earlier game they worked on called Simpsons Road Rage.
Just say no to drugs, stay in school, yada yada yada.
A game which very famously was known as a pretty blatant rip-off of Crazy Taxi, to the point that Sega even sued these guys and won.
Now that's driving. That was diddly-assed.
What they basically then did with Hit and Run was take that similar format but just expand it to be a bit less obvious, resulting in a game which a lot of people refer to as a GTA clone.
Barked it and beat my gun.
And I mean, yeah, I guess it is a GTA clone if, you know, GTA games only ever had 3 mission types all up. Considering that almost every single mission in Hit and Run involves chasing after someone and collecting stuff falling out of their vehicle, or chasing after someone and trying to destroy their car. Often multiple times in each mission and under some kind of incredibly strict time limit.
How far gets blamed for that?
And yeah, like I get that this is a Simpsons game and you're not going to be running around with Uzis and rocket launchers or getting dome off a cheap hooker, but it's always kind of pissed me off a bit how people frequently compare this thing to GTA, simply because it involves driving cars and running around. Anyway, like semantics aside, you can't deny just how unique this was overall. And it really was the first and I think the only time we've ever had a Simpsons game like this. One that just lets you run around all of these various Springfield locations and explore the whole thing at your own leisure.
Now I'm blind.
Going through familiar locations like the Quickie Mart, the comic book store, and Sector 7G of the nuclear power plant.
Not like anyone likes these things.
You can drive around the waterfront and see Burns Casino and even walk through the halls of Springfield Elementary, with it all just being packed full of references and Easter eggs from that glorious point in time when the show was still actually good.
You seem like a heavy drinker. Do you have a blender?
Not now, okay? My monkeys have escaped.
With someone on the writing team also having a serious boner for Cletus, because I swear to God this dude pops up every 5 minutes.
Thanks, Cletus.
Twarn't nothing.
You play through all the different levels as Homer, Bart, Lisa, Marge, and even Apu, and got to unlock a whole heap of cars as well, with there also being hidden vehicles unique to each area. So, as a Simpsons game specifically, it really is hard to fault, which, you know, is probably why it ended up selling 3 million copies. And yet, despite it being a household brand name and the overwhelmingly positive fan base this thing has garnered throughout the years, it's again never been ported across to any modern platforms.
How about them apples?
Which means that the only way to still play it is on the PS2, the GameCube, the Xbox, or the PC. That's the best version. And I say that the PC port is the best because despite it originally being like most early 2000s PC ports, in the way that it was incredibly broken and half-assed, it is one that's been saved largely by the modding community, making it now near flawless, with a really handy launcher that even lets you modify a bunch of in-game parameters. Which means that, again, people who are fans of the game have put more effort into maintaining and preserving it than the actual people involved in working on it.
I can sell this on the internet.
Having said that though, like, I still do think that a proper remaster would be really good. You know, aside from the fact that it'd probably sell like hotcakes, it'd also give them a chance to address a few of the game's underlying issues. Like, for instance, how awful the camera often is, especially when you're moving about on foot, making it impossible to often see where you're going. Along with this navigation system when you're driving around that relies heavily on these arrows on the road, which can just be really hard to see at times, and even more so when you're driving around under pressure. Plus, it'd also be good if they had a chance to go back in there and, you know, maybe balance out a few of the missions. Considering that there's some of these in here that are just insanely fucking difficult, you know, to an outright unfair degree.
Boring.
The first one that comes to mind is the mission where you're driving around taking out all those laser stands for Krusty that just has this ridiculous time limit, along with the route being full of pedestrians that are just asking to be run over.
Watch it, buddy. Move! Move! Move!
Along with, of course, the final few missions, with the last one genuinely being one of the worst things ever designed by another human being. I mean, just look at this. Like, the roads and sidewalks are populated with so many people, it's like a goddamn parade. Plus, you're also controlling a vehicle that feels like it's driving on ice. And the fact that all of this was designed to be played and beaten by children makes it even more bizarre.
Another one?
No!
I mean, damn dog, I'd even be happy if a remaster just gave us the option to turn off this whole wanted system. Which, yes, I know is kind of the point given the title and all, hit and run. I get it, it's in the name. But it's always just seems so pointless having cops chasing after you. And it just kind of seems like it's been put in there as a needless way to screw you over during certain missions, which it does. Either way though, like, I reckon a remaster for this thing in any capacity would just have these guys printing money. And in fact, there's actually been a fan project going on for a while here too, where someone is rebuilding the entire game from the ground up using Unreal Engine 5. Sadly though, it seems like the last time he posted any kind of update was over 2 years ago. And either way though, like, even if this thing does see the light of day, the whole thing just screams cease and desist.
But that game sounds awesome.
Still though, it'd be nice if this thing got some kind of a modern treatment, considering it really does epitomise the apex of the entire Simpsons brand.
Stupid Flanders getting happiness from religion. Everyone sucks but me.
And speaking of epitomising, there's no better example in gaming of a series that captures that whole cool and edgy culture of the early to mid-2000s than the Need for Speed games. With one title specifically being particularly responsible, and that's 2003's Underground. A game which owes a lot of its success to the Fast and the Furious movies, or I don't know, maybe it's the other way around. I don't know, forget about it, Kerr.
I said forget about it, cuz.
One thing that can't be argued though is how this single-handedly more or less saved the whole Need for Speed franchise, which really was running out of ideas by that point. I mean, that's not to say the series was dead, and in fact even the prior game, Hot Pursuit 2, still sold like a few million copies. But you could definitely tell that these guys were running out of ideas, and thankfully Underground really breathed new life into it, kicking off what a lot of people refer to as the black box era for the series, giving us some of the all-time best games and taking things in a new direction. You gotta remember that before this, it was all about luxurious and exotic supercars, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and McLarens, in all of these picturesque European environments. Kind of thing you'd expect to see Roger Moore or Sean Connery driving around in. But then with Underground, they brought that shit back to the streets, yo. Literally, with the kind of vehicles that for a lot of people were actually obtainable. You know, stuff like Honda Civics and Golf GTIs. And in fact, I even used to own one of the cars in the game, the Nissan 240SX. Well, you know what, technically mine was a 180SX, but it had the same engine and the same looking body, so whatever. The tracks were all about urban environments now too, with city streets, highways, tunnels, and industrial zones. And at the beginning of each race, you'd often have someone who looked like a backup dancer in a Britney Spears music video as the flag girl. My favourite new mode here was the drag racing, where you change up gear as quickly as possible whilst also having to dodge traffic and flying down the road at like 200 miles an hour, sweating more than a pack of nuns at a cucumber farm. It was bright, glamorous, and slick, and given the whole rise of that subculture already going on in the early 2000s, it was inevitable that this thing was going to be a huge hit, which it was, selling 15 million copies all up. With the PS2 version I think being the most popular one by far, followed by the Xbox and the PC. But I guess that EA figured that 15 million copies was enough, because they've never bothered porting this thing across to any other platform, or remastering it, or any of that stuff. In fact, you can't even get it on Steam or the EA store, which is absolutely crazy for a company like EA, who very famously like taking people's money and aren't shy about it either. This is, however, another one of those instances where the community has done most of the heavy lifting. And there's a few mods out there for this which massively overhaul it, making it look really good even by today's standards. There's even a mod out there that adds in ray tracing, which goes on to prove what I've been saying for ages now, in that you just can't slap ray tracing on something and have it automatically look good. But still, like, it does prove that there's an active group of people out there still investing their time in this. Even still though, like, that original vanilla PC port, it still holds up pretty well. I mean, like, just take a gander at it. This is a 23-year-old game, and half the effects here still look great. You got all those faux reflections on the road and the vehicle, you got the subtle motion blur and the distortion to really simulate how fast you're driving, and the modelling for all of the vehicles still looks awesome. Look at the subtle off-white colouring, the tasteful thickness of it. Oh my god, it even has a watermark. Plus this PC port also works more or less out of the box, with full controller support and all of that stuff too, so half the work's already been done. I'd guess that maybe one thing holding them back is all of the licensing when it comes to the music, because I'd imagine that sorting all of that stuff out would be a logistical nightmare. But it'd sure be worth it, all to hear that censored version of Little John's Get Low on the main menu, with those all-time most descriptive musical lyrics of Get Low, Get Low, Get Low, and of course, Get Low. You almost kind of start to admire EA's commitment to the bit, with them continuing this trend of not giving a shit about any of these games throughout pretty much all of this black box era, which happened again in the case of Underground 2, and then later on with what was the highest selling game in the series with Most Wanted in 2005, a game which is also still pretty damn good. Even if it does look arguably worse than Underground, given that by 2005 we were really starting to get into the whole bloom, lens flare and piss filter era of gaming visuals, which means that all of the bright and flashy city streets are now replaced with grey, brown and dreary highways, with the sky often being dark and overcast. It's like comparing how Christina Aguilera looked back when she was singing Genie in a Bottle to how she then looked in the music video for Dirty. Got the gist? That doesn't make it bad though. In fact, this is also a really solid entry, even bringing back the whole cops and the chase system from Hot Pursuit 2, though thankfully this time not being anywhere near as fucking annoying. Along with including another bazillion races for the player to get through, this time taking down all of the members of this elite racing blacklist one by one.
Yeah, it's Vic here. Keep your mouth shut and listen up. It don't matter to me what you got going on with the other guys, you just make sure you stay out of my way.
Ooh, you're hard, showing off.
Including what could barely be described as an overall plot, with the player working alongside a new character named Mia, who is very clearly an undercover cop, and also distractingly attractive to the point of feeling out of place.
I'll call you when the time's right. Later.
She is one saucy bitch.
Again, like Underground, this one also had a PC port, which again looks noticeably better than its console counterparts. And also, again, like Underground, has never been brought to any modern consoles. In fact, all it ever got was a release for the Xbox 360. Now, there was a reboot for this thing that came out in 2012, developed by Criterion Games, but I'd hardly call that the same thing. And from what I've seen, this was also pretty average, so a proper re-release or a remaster is still something that eludes us. I will be honest though, like, I'm not the biggest fan of these Need for Speed games. Simply because I think that they have some of the most egregious rubber banding in any racing game ever made. You know what I'm talking about. It's the way that the AI has this tendency to always be able to be right on your ass, no matter how good or bad you're actually playing. Where it's not so much about doing an entire race flawlessly, more so just not crashing in the last 10 seconds. Plus also there's always been like a really grindy aspect to all of these games, with it really feeling like quantity over quality, as it always reuses the same handful of tracks but makes you run them in a bunch of different ways, as if that's somehow not the same thing. But still though, like these games in particular have a very well deserved place in the hearts of a lot of gamers, and the fact that they've never been updated and introduced to a modern audience is just shameful. Like EA should feel shame over this. Shame. And even after playing through them again to capture footage for this video on both my PC and my Xbox, as dated as they may be in some key ways, they're still super fun to play through. Sliding around corners as you drift past the AI while listening to Overseer, Andy Hunter, or Rob Zombie, I mean that shit is still absolutely peak, and it's a vibe that modern racing games can never possibly recapture. Now, the next one is something that seems like an overlooked opportunity, and that's the first couple of Max Payne games. And I say overlooked because you'd think that given the popularity of Max Payne 3 after Rockstar Games took a swing at the series, and you know how every single gamer on the planet knows who these guys are, that maybe someone would have thought it was a good idea to update and repackage those original games. Yet again, like, no effort whatsoever has ever been done to do that. But first, like, what can you even say about the Max Payne game? I mean, for starters, they're absolutely key in making that bullet time feature in video games as popular and pivotal as it is. They also absolutely redefined cinematic storytelling with those comic book style graphic novel cutscenes that are just downright iconic.
Don't answer that. A rhetorical question. I got something for the boss. Lupino around?
That kind of depends on who's asking. A friend or a junk squad plan.
Not to mention the whole dark and grounded tone, playing as a protagonist with quite literally nothing to lose. A dude plagued with grief and desperately seeking revenge, popping back painkiller meds like they're Skittles. And I don't think you really had to be there either, in the sense that both of these games still hold up really well as shooters, and visually they're still awesome to look at. So there's a bit of a sense there of where's the fucking remasters?
I thought you'd bring it. You were supposed to bring it. Yeah, right.
That's actually hilarious.
Now, the main way to play either of these games is obviously on the PC, which works okay for the most part, but it does require a bit of buggering around to get them working on modern operating systems. And I can say that with the first game, which I was replaying recently, I had to install a bunch of patches to even get it running. And even then, after that, I still needed to cap the frame rate and then mess around with a bunch of other options until it was finally stable. Thankfully though, the second game is mostly stress-free. It is worth mentioning too that you can actually play the first game on the PlayStation 4 if you grab this thing off the digital store. However, it is worth noting that this is an updated version of the PS2 port, which is without a doubt the worst possible way to play the first game. And while this updated version does improve the resolution and some of the performance issues, it doesn't include a proper widescreen setting, plus it also keeps the level split up into these smaller segments. Something which made sense back on the PS2, given how that thing was about as powerful as a baby's fart, but it does feel out of place here on the PS4. Your other option is to play both these games on an Xbox Series X, assuming you've got one, which does take advantage of that console's whole backwards compatibility thing, which really is one of the better options, especially given how solid those old Xbox ports were. But even still, like as good as they are, they're still miles behind the PC. Some people might also try to tell you that a remaster already exists for the first game, and in some ways it does, kind of, because there is a fan mod there that updates all of the textures with this shitty AI upscaling effect. And if you like that stuff, well, then that's fine, but I just kind of feel like that effect is about as obvious as a pee stain on a pair of denim jeans. And some of these so-called upscaled textures just look like absolute shit. In fact, putting AI upscaled at the start of anything is usually guaranteed to make it look awful. Just go check out some of the mods that people have made for stuff like Resident Evil and the Final Fantasy games.
What is it?
I guess my point is, if you're gonna tell me that this stuff counts, then no, it doesn't. Plus it ain't like official anyway, so who gives a shit? I would say we're more likely to get the Max Payne remake before we get any kind of remaster, but I don't know, like given how Remedy are looking financially lately, who knows if we'll even get that. Either way though, absolutely, another couple of games definitely worthy of some kind of official update. If only to introduce to a new generation of gamers just how fun it is shoot dodging away into a room with dual Mac-10s and mowing everyone down. Get him.
Hilarious.
Now, the mid to late 2000s is really one of those eras where we just seem to be inundated with good versus evil kind of games. Stuff like Mass Effect, Knights of the Old Republic, Bioshock, Fallout 3, Artificial Academy, and case in point, Infamous. Developed by Sucker Punch and released in 2009 exclusively for the PlayStation 3, making it one of the main reasons to own that console, along with of course the seminal first-person shooter Haze. Infamous really stood apart from the others though, also being something of a superhero origin story, where you played as a dude named Cole McGrath who suddenly found himself imbued with electrical abilities.
Scary as hell at first. You gotta understand, there was no one to talk to, no experts to consult.
Trapped in a walled-off city under martial law after an explosion that killed thousands of people, where throughout the game you could choose to either be the city's white or dark knight, defending the innocent from all the violence and the bloodshed, or instead exploiting it for your own personal gain.
I could heal him, or I could just grab his shards and take off. It's not like he can stop me. Do it.
Outright affecting what powers you got and the inevitable outcome. Throughout the story, you took on all these different criminal factions whilst your skills grew, culminating in a final encounter against a mysterious individual named Kessler, with it then resulting in one of gaming's all-time best plot twists. It's like a third-person shooter primarily, combined with a bunch of parkour moves and melee combat, where you use power cables and train lines to quickly traverse the city, stopping everything from petty crime right through to these humongous assaults and shootouts, with Cole also being a super interesting character, suffering from some pretty severe survivor's guilt, and the dwindling relationship with his best buddy and his girlfriend being the only thing holding him together.
This isn't a game, Zeke. Not anymore.
Giving us what's easily one of the most memorable games on the PS3, if only for how insanely addictive it is jumping off rooftops and slamming into the ground to pulverize your enemies, along with dropping literal thunderbolts from the sky as you take an electrical deuce on your opponents. Yeah, awesome. And then the second game changed things up even more, improving the visuals and the parkour moves, adding in new combat elemental abilities and taking place in an entirely different city, which makes it another one of those instances where it's kind of baffling as to why they've never bothered to bring it to a newer audience, considering the first game sold around 2 million copies, with the second game doing similar numbers, and then the third game on the PlayStation 4 going on to sell over 6. Also considering how the developers, Sucker Punch Studios, are still highly regarded by a lot of Sony's fans and actively still making games, with the most recent work being the Ghost of Tsushima series. This one's even worse too, considering it only ever got released for the PlayStation 3. Yeah dog, no Xbox 360 or PC version. None of that, despite there being a strong fan base there that would absolutely lap that shit up like a gamer girl's bathwater.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
Now most likely with this instance, it's probably due to the PS3's whole architecture, given how notoriously difficult and time consuming it's supposed to be to port games over from that platform. Which is probably also too why we've never had remasters for stuff like Metal Gear Solid 4, Killzone 2 and 3, and of course, Haze. Seems like Sony only really bothers with it if it's a game they know is going to make them some serious bank, which would explain why they've remastered and ported over the Uncharted games and The Last of Us more times than have taken your mum out for a nice seafood dinner. But I can't help but think that some kind of infamous collection that came bundled with the first two games, along with that awesome Halloween-themed DLC for the second game, would have people beyond this like white on rice. Or, you know, like flies on shit. Or like a pack of seagulls on hot chips, you get the point. And speaking of games trapped on the 7th generation of consoles, that finally brings us on to the last game in the series, and the one which arguably needs it the most, or at least deserves it the most, with The Darkness. Yeah, Starbreeze Studios' 2007 cult classic, which is truly one of those if you know kind of games. Originally released for the PS3 and the Xbox 360, with the latter version still being a really solid way to play through the game, whereas the PS3 version, in typical PS3 version fashion, is complete and utter shit, with a frame rate and performance that's so bad it'll make you think you're having a stroke. The story in this one is you're playing as a hitman named Jackie Estacado, betrayed by the mob after a failed hit, where his girlfriend Jenny is murdered and he's also possessed by an ancient demonic force that's been in his bloodline for centuries, all while barely being 21 years of age. I mean, when I was 21, I was living at home, going paycheck to paycheck, and wasting most of my time smoking weed and trying to get laid. And yeah, I only succeeded at one of those.
What the hell are you talking about?
And this dude's out here getting possessed by super powerful demons and taking down entire crime families. Like, talk about a show-off. Anyway, with his newfound abilities, he's able to grow tendrils out of his back, along with summoning little demons to do his bidding, and generally just survive a bit better than your average Joe. I mean, he's not leaping over buildings in a single bound or any of that stuff, but given that his foes are mostly bruschetta and red wine sipping creeps, he's got a definite edge. And the backstory about how the darkness has been in his family for so long is really interesting stuff too, letting the player explore all of these nightmarish environments as they try to put all the pieces together. Overall, it's a really unique shooter, with this mechanic of having to constantly destroy light sources so that darkness can thrive being pivotal, along with an interesting dual world feature during shootouts. You start off in the gritty streets of New York, going through subway tunnels, sewers and back alleys, along with cemeteries and an abandoned orphanage before the final showdown against your old boss, which ends exactly how you'd want it to, with Jackie fully embracing this new entity and just ruthlessly murdering everyone responsible for Jenny's death. It is, however, a console-only first-person shooter, which is also exactly what it feels like. And this thing would absolutely benefit from a few updates to certain things, namely with the controls, which is something a remaster could totally address. I mean, what you're essentially doing here is playing a third-person shooter from a first-person perspective. If you look down, you'll see Jackie's arms and legs, and look into any mirror, and you can even see his head and torso. And this thing was pretty standard for Starbreeze Studios. I mean, they took the same approach with the Chronicles of Riddick games, and even a later game of theirs called Syndicate, which is also known as a Bloom simulator, did the same thing as well. What it does mean though is that every time you turn or move around, there's a slight delay while all your bits and bobs catch up. And in the case of aiming smoothly and trying to be more accurate, it does make the shooting feel a bit clunky. It's kind of like trying to figure skate in a bowl of SpaghettiOs. I don't really know what that means.
What the hell are you talking about?
I guess my point is that an updated version that could go in there and fix all this stuff and smooth it out would just do wonders for how it plays overall. Now, there is kind of a remaster for this thing already, in the sense that if you do play it on an Xbox Series X, you get a slightly better resolution and a frame rate, due again to that console's awesome backwards compatibility, which at this point is really the only reason to ever own one of those things. But again, like a proper, full-on remaster still eludes us. and it's still only available for the PS3 and the Xbox 360, with it really being trapped on both those platforms, excluding of course the whole emulation scene. There may at least be a little bit of hope for this one, considering that the folks over at Night Dive Studios have mentioned that it's something they'd like to obtain and work on. In fact, I think back in 2023, old mate Stephen Kicker expressed an interest in doing it, even adding that it's on the list.
Who gives a shit?
So, yeah man, who knows, maybe someday in the future, people might be watching this video and it's gonna be a moot point, with that remaster having been released and as popular as it deserves to be.
I'd like to think so!
Either way though, here we are yet again at the end of another video. Like I said before, if you can think of any other games that need remastering, well, be sure to let me know in the comments section below. And also too, if you have played any of these games that I talked about, well, I'm always keen to hear what people think about them in the current day, so yeah, drop a comment down there too. If you enjoy this kind of content, well, maybe think about being a cuck and subscribing, or I don't know, perhaps being an even bigger cuck and supporting me on Patreon. Regardless though, thanks for sticking around and yeah, thanks for watching.
Perfection, thy name is Bart.